Bonjour. The single word floated through the air like a soft note in a quiet room, and it made CEO Daniel Grant freeze mid-step. It wasn't unusual to hear French inside the headquarters of his multinational tech empire. His company did business in over 30 countries. French, Spanish, Mandarin. These were all part of the daily hum of voices that filled the sleek glass building. But what was unusual was who said it. Daniel turned his head slightly, his polished shoes clicking softly against the marble floor. And there, just a few feet away, stood James Carter, the quiet, middle-aged janitor who had been working in the building for more than a decade. James was leaning on his mop, his posture casual, his face lit with a genuine smile as he spoke to a French visitor who was waiting in the lobby. His accent wasn't just good. It was flawless, rich, fluid, and natural, as if he had been born and raised on the streets of Paris. Daniel's brow furrowed. That's impressive. The CEO started walking again, but something in his gut told him to slow down, to watch. And just as he took another step, James glanced up and spotted another employee passing by. Without missing a beat, he switched languages. Buenos dias, señora. James greeted warmly, rolling the words off his tongue with the easy rhythm of a native Spanish speaker. The woman grinned, clearly delighted, and responded in Spanish before walking away. Daniel paused completely now, curiosity sparking like a live wire. Was this a coincidence? Or was James just really good at a few phrases? His answer came seconds later. A delivery worker, pushing a stack of packages toward the reception desk, entered the lobby. James looked up, smiled, and launched into rapid, fluid Mandarin. His tone, his intonation, it wasn't the awkward attempt of someone parroting a phrase. It was alive, confident, and conversational. Daniel blinked. No way. The delivery worker's face lit up with surprise. He responded in Mandarin, and the two exchanged a few quick sentences before James returned to his mopping as though nothing unusual had happened. But Daniel's mind was now spinning. 3 languages. In under a minute. And each of them spoken with the kind of fluency you just couldn't fake. He took a few steps closer, pretending to check his phone, just to see if there was more to this strange discovery. And then, without warning, James called out to someone across the lobby. Dobria Udra. He said warmly. The young man in a dark suit turned, smiled, and responded in Russian before disappearing into an elevator. Daniel's eyes widened. That makes 4. For languages. Effortless. Seamless. What in the world was going on? For years, Daniel had barely noticed James. Not in a cruel way, just the reality of being a busy CEO. James was part of the background of the building. Quiet, efficient, never drawing attention to himself. He came in early, kept the place spotless, and went home without fanfare. But now Daniel saw him in an entirely different light. This wasn't just a janitor. This was someone with a rare, extraordinary skill, hidden in plain sight. And it wasn't just the languages that struck Daniel. It was the way James spoke them. There was no hesitation, no stiff textbook pronunciation. It was natural, human, alive. The kind of skill that took years, maybe decades, to master. Daniel felt a strange mixture of admiration and something else. Regret, maybe. How many times had he walked past this man without ever stopping to talk? How many talents went unnoticed inside his own company because nobody bothered to look deeper? The thought gnawed at him. As James finished his conversation and quietly resumed cleaning, Daniel knew one thing for certain. He needed to understand this man's story. Not later. Not when he had time. Now. He straightened his tie, glanced once more at the unassuming figure in the janitor's uniform, and made a silent decision. This wasn't going to be just another ordinary day at Grant Technologies. Because Daniel Grant, CEO of one of the biggest tech companies in the country, had just stumbled upon a secret, one that could change everything. Later that afternoon, Daniel sat at his desk, staring at a glowing email on his computer screen, but his mind wasn't on work. He kept replaying what he'd seen in the lobby that morning. For languages. Effortless fluency. And the man speaking them was his janitor. Finally, he pushed his chair back and pressed the intercom. Can you send James Carter to my office, please? A few minutes later, there was a knock. The door opened, and James stepped in hesitantly, holding his mop handle like it was some kind of shield. His uniform was slightly damp from cleaning, and his shoes squeaked faintly against the polished wood floor. You wanted to see me, sir? His voice was cautious, almost wary. Daniel gestured toward the chair across from him. Have a seat. James sat down slowly, his hands resting in his lap. Sir, he began carefully, did I do something wrong? Daniel chuckled, shaking his head. Quite the opposite. In fact, I'm impressed. No, scratch that. I'm stunned. James tilted his head slightly. Stunned. This morning, Daniel said, leaning forward on his elbows. I saw you speak French, Spanish, Mandarin, and Russian, all in the span of about a minute. James blinked, then shrugged modestly. Oh yes, I guess you did. Daniel's eyes narrowed in curiosity. So how many languages do you actually know? James hesitated, as if unsure whether to tell the truth. 9. Daniel sat back in his chair, his eyebrows shooting up. 9. James nodded, almost apologetic. Yes, sir. English, French, Spanish, Mandarin, Russian, Arabic, German, Japanese, and Italian. For a moment, the only sound in the office was the faint hum of the air conditioning. Daniel tried to process it. 9 languages, 9 cultures, 9 entire worlds, locked inside the mind of the man who swept his hallways. James, Daniel finally said, why on earth are you a janitor here when you have that kind of skill? James looked down at his hands, fiddling with the edge of his sleeve. Because, sir, life doesn't always go the way you plan. Daniel stayed silent, letting him continue. I studied languages in college, James said quietly. It was my passion. I wanted to work in international relations, maybe even for the United Nations someday. I dreamed of traveling the world, helping people communicate across borders. That was the plan. He gave a faint, humorless chuckle. But dreams have a funny way of slipping through your fingers. My father got sick during my final year at university. Hospital bills piled up. My mom couldn't cover them on her own. I had to take any job I could find. So you started cleaning? Daniel asked softly. James nodded. A friend told me about an opening for a janitor in this building. I thought it would be temporary, just until things settled down. And 1 year turned into 3. 3 turned into 10. His voice faltered, but he kept his eyes fixed on his hands. By the time my father passed, I'd been here so long it felt like starting over would be impossible. I got comfortable, invisible even. Daniel studied him for a moment. This wasn't just another employee with an impressive resume. This was someone who had sacrificed his dreams for his family. A man with extraordinary talent, buried under years of quiet routine. James, Daniel said firmly, you're not invisible. Not anymore. James gave a faint smile. I appreciate that, sir. But I'm just a janitor. No, Daniel replied, leaning forward. You're a man who can speak to 9 different nations without leaving this room. That's not just anything. That's rare. That's valuable. James looked up, meeting the CEO's gaze for the first time. There was a flicker of hope there, small, but alive. Daniel felt a spark of excitement in his chest. This wasn't the end of their conversation. In fact, he knew it was only the beginning. Because the man sitting across from him wasn't just part of the cleaning staff. He was a hidden treasure, one Daniel had no intention of leaving buried. The next morning, Daniel was already in his office before the sun fully rose, sipping his coffee as an idea played over and over in his head. James's talent wasn't just impressive, it was a potential game changer. And Daniel wanted to see what it could do in action. At 8:30 sharp, the intercom buzzed. James Carter is here to see you, his assistant said. Send him in, Daniel replied, setting his mug down. James stepped inside, still in his janitor's uniform, holding a set of keys clipped to his belt. You wanted to see me again, sir? He asked cautiously. Daniel leaned back in his chair, folding his hands. I have a meeting this morning with some very important foreign investors. They're from France and China. I'd like you to be there. James blinked. Me? Yes, you, Daniel said matter-of-factly. The janitor frowned, glancing down at his faded uniform. Sir, I'm not exactly wearing a suit. I'm not even sure I belong in that kind of meeting. Daniel's lips curved into a grin. Don't worry. I'll take care of that. 2 hours later, James barely recognized himself in the mirror. Gone was the gray janitor's uniform. In its place was a crisp navy suit that fit perfectly across his shoulders, paired with a pale blue shirt and a deep silk tie. His shoes gleamed from a fresh polish, and a small gold-trimmed company badge was pinned neatly to his lapel. You look the part now, Daniel said approvingly as he stepped into the room. James gave an awkward smile. I feel like I'm wearing someone else's life. Good. Daniel said with a chuckle. Because after today, that just might be the case. Inside the boardroom, the atmosphere was tense but professional. A long glass table stretched from end to end, the morning light spilling in from floor-to-ceiling windows. The investors, 3 from France, 2 from China, were already seated, speaking rapidly among themselves in their native languages. Daniel took his seat at the head of the table. James stood slightly to the side, hands folded in front of him, quietly observing. The moment the meeting began, one of the French investors leaned forward, speaking in fast, fluid French. To most people in the room, it would have sounded like an incomprehensible blur. But to James, it was as clear as daylight. He stepped forward, his voice calm and confident. Mr. Laurent says he's pleased to be here and is eager to discuss the expansion into the European market. James translated flawlessly. The French investor raised an eyebrow, impressed at the accuracy and the Parisian perfection of James's pronunciation. For the next 15 minutes, James moved between French and English effortlessly, his tone matching the formality and rhythm of each speaker. The investors began directing their remarks to him directly, almost forgetting Daniel was there. Then the conversation shifted. One of the Chinese investors leaned in, speaking in rapid Mandarin about potential manufacturing partnerships. James didn't even blink. His voice flowed smoothly into Mandarin, responding directly before translating for Daniel and the rest of the board. Every time he spoke, Daniel noticed the subtle reactions, nods of respect, exchanged glances, faint smiles. This wasn't just translation. James was building trust in real time, bridging worlds with nothing but words. By the time the meeting wrapped up nearly an hour later, the atmosphere had transformed completely. The investors were leaning back in their chairs, smiling, their earlier caution replaced with genuine enthusiasm. One of the French investors stood, reaching across the table to shake James's hand. In French, he said warmly, "You should be running this company's international department." James chuckled politely, translating the comment into English for Daniel. But Daniel didn't need the translation. He understood every word. And it only confirmed what he had already decided. As the investors signed the final documents, securing a deal worth millions, Daniel sat back, a quiet satisfaction settling over him. James had just proven, beyond any doubt, that his talent wasn't just remarkable, it was indispensable. And Daniel? He already had a plan for exactly what to do next. The following week, Daniel sent out an email with a single line. Mandatory company-wide meeting. Main hall. Friday, 10 a.m. No other details. By Friday morning, curiosity was running wild through the building. People whispered in hallways, speculating about what the announcement could be. Some thought it was a new partnership, others feared layoffs, and a few joked it might just be a new coffee machine in the break room. At exactly 10 o'clock, the main hall was packed. The hum of voices filled the air as employees from every department crowded around the stage. The polished wooden platform, flanked by 2 large company banners, stood ready. When Daniel Grant walked out, the chatter instantly died down. The CEO rarely addressed the entire company at once. When he did, it was big. He stepped up to the microphone, scanning the sea of expectant faces. His voice carried warmth and authority. "Good morning, everyone. Today, I want to talk about someone who has been working in this company for over 10 years. Heads turned. Whispers began. Someone, Daniel continued, most of you pass by every single day. Someone you've seen working quietly, never drawing attention to himself, but carrying an incredible gift most people never noticed. A ripple of murmurs spread through the crowd. People glanced at each other, trying to guess who it might be. This man, Daniel said, his voice steady but filled with pride, speaks 9 languages fluently. And just last week, he played a critical role in helping us close one of the biggest deals in our company's history. Gasps broke out. Several employees raised their eyebrows, scanning the room for the mystery man. Daniel turned slightly, his smile widening. "James Carter, please join me on stage." For a moment, silence hung in the air, followed by a collective gasp as James emerged from the side of the stage. He wasn't wearing the navy suit from the investor meeting. Instead, he had chosen a simple shirt and slacks, looking every bit the humble man he had always been. But there was something different now, a quiet confidence in the way he walked. As James stepped up beside him, Daniel placed a hand on his shoulder. "From today forward," Daniel announced, his voice ringing through the hall. James will no longer be our janitor. He will be our new director of international relations. For a split second, the room was still, and then it exploded. Cheers erupted from every corner. Some employees stood and clapped, others whistled loudly. A few looked stunned, mouths slightly open, realizing they had just learned something extraordinary about a man they had passed in the hallway for years without a second thought. James's eyes glistened. He looked out over the crowd, faces he had quietly cleaned up after for over a decade, and felt a lump rise in his throat. I don't know what to say, he whispered into the microphone. His voice was unsteady, but his smile was genuine. Daniel leaned closer with a grin. Say it in all 9 languages, if you want. That got a laugh from the crowd, and James obliged. He began in French, merci beaucoup, then Spanish, muchas gracias, Mandarin, xie, Russian, spatha, Arabic, German, vielen Dank, Japanese, arigato gozaimasu, Italian, grazie mille, and finally, in English, thank you, truly, from the bottom of my heart. The room roared with applause again, and for the first time in years, James didn't feel invisible. Daniel glanced at him with pride. He knew this was more than just a promotion. It was a recognition long overdue, a reminder to everyone in the room that greatness doesn't always sit in the corner office. Sometimes, it's been quietly mopping the floors all along. From that day forward, James's life transformed in ways he could never have imagined. The man who had once arrived before sunrise to mop floors now found himself stepping off airplanes in cities he had only read about in books. He traveled alongside Daniel to international conferences, Tokyo, Madrid, Paris, each trip a new chapter in the life he thought he'd lost years ago. In Tokyo, he effortlessly moved between English and Japanese during meetings, making clients feel at ease in their own language. In Madrid, his fluent Spanish not only sealed a major partnership, but earned him an invitation to a private dinner with the city's mayor. And in Paris, where his journey had first caught Daniel's attention, James was welcomed like an old friend, his Parisian accent drawing smiles from even the most serious business leaders. But perhaps his proudest moment came in Beijing. Negotiations had reached a tense point with a high-profile partner. The room was heavy with formality, and it seemed the deal might collapse. Then James stepped in, speaking Mandarin with warmth and sincerity, breaking the ice with a perfectly timed cultural reference that made everyone laugh. What had been on the brink of failure turned into a handshake agreement. In Dubai, his Arabic skills opened doors to an entire market the company had struggled to connect with for years. His ability to move between cultures wasn't just about language. It was about understanding people, earning trust, and bridging worlds. James was no longer just a part of the company. He was its face in the global arena. Articles were written about him, and he was invited to speak at language conferences and leadership events. His story was shared online, going viral as an inspiring reminder that talent can come from the most unexpected places. Yet, despite all the success, James never forgot where he came from. Every morning, no matter how busy his schedule, he made time to walk through the halls and greet the cleaning staff in their native languages. Maria from the night shift got a warm "Buenos dias." Ahmed from maintenance always heard a cheerful May, who handled recycling, smiled every time she heard his gentle "Zao Sang Ok." He didn't just say hello. He stopped, asked about their families, shared jokes, and listened. They weren't just coworkers to him. They were part of the foundation that kept the company running. When new hires asked why the director of international relations was chatting with the janitors every morning, he would smile and say, "Because no job is small, and no person is invisible." Those words spread through the building. Soon, other managers started doing the same, taking the time to know the people behind the titles. Daniel, too, carried a lesson from the experience. He had always prided himself on spotting talent, but James had taught him something deeper, that sometimes the most valuable people in your company aren't in corner offices or listed on executive boards. They could be anywhere, quietly doing work no one notices, until someone finally sees them. He shared that lesson often, telling colleagues at business events, "If you want to find the real treasures in your organization, stop looking only at resumes. Start looking at people." As the years passed, James's story became a legend inside Grant Technologies. It was told to every new hire during orientation. There was once a janitor here who spoke 9 languages. Most people walked past him without a second thought, until one day, the CEO overheard him speaking to visitors in different tongues. That day changed everything, for him and for the company. And the story always ended with the same advice. Look around. You never know who might be sitting or mopping right next to you. For James, it was more than a promotion. It was proof that even when life takes you off course, your skills, your passion, and your potential never truly disappear. Sometimes, they're just waiting for the right moment and the right person to bring them to light. And as he stood in yet another airport, boarding pass in hand, heading off to represent his company in another country, James Carter smiled to himself. The janitor was long gone, but the man who loved languages, he was just getting started.